Picture this. You wake up on a crisp spring morning, open your blinds, and there it is, your front yard pride and joy. A sturdy tree, weathered by winters past, quietly doing what trees do best, standing tall, sprouting buds, whispering in the breeze like Mother Nature's personal motivational coach. You pour your coffee, smile at the sight of fresh green tips poking out from the branches, and think, ah, yes, the circle of life is alive and well in my yard. Then, bam! A letter from your HOA shows up in your mailbox with all the charm of a tax audit wrapped in junk mail. You tear it open, and what does it say? Dear homeowner, your tree is dead. Remove immediately. Dead? Dead? The very tree you just watched stretch out little leafy arms like it was auditioning for a Disney montage? Apparently, your HOA's expert arborists, armed with nothing but a clipboard and an ego, have declared your thriving buddy deceased. Cue dramatic gasp. This is the HOA equivalent of calling the paramedics on someone because they took a nap. Imagine lying on your couch after a long day and suddenly your neighbors are pounding at the door screaming, "He's gone! Call 911!" That's the exact energy here. The homeowner, understandably confused, did what most modern warriors do when faced with injustice. They posted photos online. And let me tell you, these weren't vague, grainy shots from a flip phone. We're talking high-definition proof, close-ups of fresh buds, new shoots, clear signs of life. Basically, it was botanical receipts. Yet somehow, the HOA looked at that same tree and said, "Yup, this one belongs in a Tim Burton movie." Now, let's unpack why this is so absurd. First off, anyone with basic biology knowledge knows that trees go through cycles. They lose their leaves in winter, they bud in spring, they glow in summer, and they explode into Instagram-worthy colors in fall. Unless your HOA has recently discovered a parallel universe where seasons don't exist, calling a budding tree dead is like declaring a teenager grounded for yawning. But here's where it gets hilarious. The tree in question wasn't just barely alive. It wasn't clinging to life support. No, this tree was full-on sending out new shoots like it had a 5-year plan and a gym membership. Budding is the arboreal equivalent of shouting, "I'm back, baby!" And the HOA? They took one glance and basically wrote the tree's obituary. Now, let's pause here for a thought experiment. Imagine the HOA as a doctor. You go in for a checkup, feeling great, eating your veggies, hitting the treadmill. The doc looks at your chart, listens to your heartbeat, then sighs, "Sorry, you're dead. We'll need to remove you from the neighborhood immediately." That's the medical accuracy we're dealing with here. The kicker, the homeowner wasn't even asking for help at first. They just wanted to confirm they weren't losing their mind. The Reddit post was literally titled something along the lines of, "Is this tree alive? HOA says it's dead." And the photos made it crystal clear. The HOA wasn't just wrong. They were embarrassingly wrong. Here's the thing. Trees aren't like cell phones that stop working overnight. They're resilient, stubborn, slow-moving giants. Unless a tree is literally hollowed out, crumbling, or producing mushrooms like it's hosting Coachella for fungi, odds are it's alive. And budding, that's the clearest sign in the world. Yet the HOA managed to miss it like a student sleeping through the easiest question on the test. And you have to wonder, what's the HOA's obsession with calling for tree executions? Do they think a slightly bare tree lowers property values? Are they secretly at war with nature? Or is this just another case of people in positions of minor power flexing like they're running the Pentagon? My bet is the last one. Give some folks a clipboard, and suddenly they think they're Judge Judy with the side of Captain Planet. Now, to be fair, maybe the board members don't understand how trees work. Maybe they skipped the day in school when the teacher explained seasons. Maybe they thought perennial was a brand of laundry detergent. But ignorance stops being cute when it costs real people money. And removing a tree is no small bill. Depending on the size, you're looking at hundreds, even thousands of dollars to take it down. Imagine being told to shell out that kind of cash for no reason other than your HOA thinks winter equals death. And here's where the homeowner becomes the hero of this story. Instead of quietly obeying, they pushed back. Posting online not only proved the tree was alive, it also highlighted how absurd HOA rulings can get. It turned a local frustration into a viral example of HOA pettiness. And the internet, as usual, didn't hold back. So yes, the tree lives on. For now. But this saga sets the stage for what we'll see again and again. HOAs making calls not based on facts, science, or logic, but on vibes. And apparently, their vibes were telling them, this tree is toast. If that's how the HOA sees trees, just wait until you hear what the internet had to say about it. Because when Reddit smells nonsense, it doesn't just comment, it roasts. And trust me, this roast was extra crispy.
Ah, Reddit. The place where memes are born, petty arguments become national debates, and HOA horror stories are practically their own genre. When our confused homeowner took to Reddit to post photos of their allegedly dead tree, they probably just wanted a second opinion. But what they got? A masterclass in public roasting so fierce it could have set the HOA's meeting minutes on fire. First, let's appreciate the setup. The post included photos, clear, undeniable shots of a tree sprouting buds, little green soldiers popping out like they were auditioning for a shampoo commercial. And then the caption, "Is this tree alive? HOA says it's dead." Simple, honest, almost innocent. It was like tossing a single breadcrumb into a park full of pigeons. The internet pounced. The very first wave of comments nailed the obvious. Why do they think it's dead? A dead tree wouldn't produce buds. Boom. Science delivered in one sentence. Others chimed in with a mix of disbelief and sarcasm. "Sucks you have to explain winter to the HOA," one user wrote, probably shaking their head so hard they burned calories. That one line became the unofficial catchphrase of the thread. Explaining winter to the HOA. Imagine having to hold a PowerPoint presentation where slide 1 says, trees lose leaves. Slide 2, they grow back. You can almost picture an HOA board member sitting there, confused, taking notes like this was brand new information. But Reddit didn't stop at mocking. No, no, no. Redditors treat HOA absurdity like professional comedians treat hecklers. It's open season. Some users suggested mailing the HOA a calendar with the season circled in red. Others joked about sending a copy of the Lorax with a note, "This could be you." One even quipped, "What's next? They'll demand you repaint the sky because it's too gray?" Honestly, it felt less like a thread about trees and more like a roast battle where the HOA never showed up to defend themselves. And here's the thing. This is why HOA blunders go viral. Because on Reddit, especially in communities like r/arborists or r/mildly infuriating, people love nothing more than exposing incompetence wrapped in authority. The tree story wasn't just funny, it was relatable. Everyone has dealt with someone in power who clearly has no idea what they're talking about. Seeing an HOA confuse winter dormancy with death hit the internet's funny bone like a hammer. One commenter even broke down the logic gap. If this tree is dead, then my grandma's houseplants are zombies because they came back to life after I watered them. That line alone probably had half the readers spitting out their coffee. Another chimed in, next time the HOA declares something dead, check for a pulse. I bet your mailbox is alive too. The jokes practically wrote themselves. But beyond the laughs, there was solidarity. Reddit has this magical way of making people feel less alone in their frustrations. Dozens of users shared similar experiences. HOAs declaring perfectly fine shrubs as unsightly, boards demanding residents rip up gardens because they look messy, or even letters about lawns being too green. Yes, apparently that's a crime somewhere. The tree incident became a symbol, proof that the madness wasn't just happening to one unlucky homeowner, it was systemic. And then came the practical advice, because Reddit isn't just a roast pit, it's also a hive mind of problem solvers. One user suggested the fingernail scratch test. Scrape a little bark, and if it's green underneath, the tree's alive. Others recommended documenting everything with photos, dates, and notes, so the HOA tried to find the homeowner, they'd have proof ready to shove right back in their face. It was part comedy club, part legal workshop. Now, let's be real. Getting roasted online is usually not fun. But in this case, the HOA wasn't even there to defend themselves. The homeowner? They came out looking like a victim of absurdity, backed by an army of sarcastic internet warriors. The HOA? They came out looking like the clueless villains of a sitcom episode. And that's the beauty of it. Reddit turned a small, local dispute into a public trial where the verdict was unanimous. The HOA was guilty of being hilariously uninformed. So while the homeowner might have been stressed about the notice, at least they walked away with something priceless. The entire internet validating their sanity. Sometimes all you need is a digital crowd chanting, "It's alive! It's alive!" like Dr. Frankenstein to remind you that you're not the crazy one here. But roasting only gets you so far. The internet can laugh, mock, and meme all day. But what about the practical side? How do you actually prove, once and for all, that your tree is alive? Stick around because the next fact reveals the simple dirt under your nails test that shuts HOAs up faster than you can say photosynthesis 101.
All right, so at this point, the homeowners got a letter from the HOA declaring their very much alive tree dead on arrival. And Reddit has collectively roasted the board like chestnuts on an open fire. Funny? Absolutely. But practical? Not so much, because jokes don't stop fines, and sarcasm won't keep your tree standing if the HOA insists on bringing in the chainsaws. That's where the heroes of the internet stepped in, with one of the simplest, most brilliant, and most dirt-cheap life hacks ever, the fingernail test. Here's how it works. You don't need a degree in botany, an expensive arborist consultation, or some high-tech gadget that scans tree DNA. Nope. You just walk outside, pick a small branch or shoot on your tree, and give it a gentle scratch with your fingernail, or a coin if you've got fancy manicures to protect. If the layer underneath is green and moist, congratulations, your tree is alive and thriving. If it's brown and dry, then, well, the HOA might have a point this time. And here's the kicker. It's instant, undeniable proof. No HOA board member can argue with biology literally staring them in the face. That little strip of green under the bark is like a neon sign flashing, "Alive, baby!" Imagine the satisfaction of inviting the HOA rep over, scratching a branch in front of them and saying, "Behold life," while their clipboard trembles in shame. Now let's pause and appreciate how absurd it is that homeowners need to resort to kindergarten-level science experiments to defend themselves against their own governing boards. This is the same as proving water is wet or that the sun rises in the east. But in HOA land, nothing is obvious until you've presented a full portfolio of evidence, preferably notarized and stapled. The fingernail test became the golden nugget of the Reddit thread because it transformed the conversation from jokes into strategy. Suddenly, the homeowner wasn't just a victim of absurdity, they had a weapon. And not just any weapon, a free, foolproof HOA silencing tool that takes less time than microwaving popcorn. Think about the irony for a second. The HOA sent an official notice, typed up, mailed, processed, probably discussed at a board meeting where someone raised their hand and confidently declared, "That tree is dead." Yet the truth could be uncovered with a literal fingernail. It's like hiring a private investigator to find your missing car keys, only to realize they've been in your pocket all along. This also sparked a bigger discussion online. Why don't HOAs do the bare minimum before issuing these kinds of notices? A board that's supposed to protect property values should at least have a working knowledge of, the difference between a dormant tree and a corpse. Instead, they skip the fact-checking step and leave homeowners scrambling.
The fingernail test is proof that the power imbalance is less about knowledge and more about authority. Let's dramatize this for a second. Picture the scene like a courtroom. The HOA is the prosecution, walking in with a dramatic accusation. Your Honor, this tree is deceased. The homeowner, flustered but prepared, whips out their evidence, a scratched branch showing a bright green streak. Gasps echo through the courtroom. The judge bangs the gavel. Case dismissed. The tree lives. Cue applause. Honestly, I'd pay to watch that on court TV. And here's where it gets even juicier. Once the fingernail test enters the chat, the homeowner now has leverage. If the HOA doubles down and insists the tree is dead despite green proof, they're not just wrong, they're unreasonable. And unreasonable HOAs are the exact kind of content that thrives online. Imagine the headline, HOA denies trees obvious signs of life, demands removal anyway. It practically writes itself. But beyond the laughs, this little trick has huge implications because it empowers homeowners. It's easy to feel powerless when you're up against an HOA. After all, they've got rules, fines, and the power to make your life miserable. But the fingernail test flips the script. Suddenly, you're not just a frustrated resident. You're a scientist, an investigator, and the owner of undeniable evidence that makes the HOA look like they skipped science class. And let's be honest, there's something kind of poetic about it. A fingernail, a tiny everyday tool, outsmarts a whole committee of clipboard-wielding adults. Nature wins. Simplicity wins. The homeowner wins. The HOA? Well, they lose harder than a cat in a bath. So next time your HOA declares something on your property dead, remember the power you hold right at your fingertips. Literally. Because while they're busy drafting letters and pretending to be tree coroners, you've got the truth hiding just beneath the bark. And that truth is green, glowing, and very much alive. But here's the real kicker. This wasn't just a one-time blender. Nope. This tree fiasco is part of a long, ugly pattern of HOAs flexing their authority in ways that make no sense. If you thought misdiagnosing a tree was ridiculous, wait till you see the laundry list of petty power plays HOAs pull off on a daily basis.
By now, you're probably thinking, okay, one mistaken tree diagnosis? Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe the HOA was having a bad day. Oh, my sweet summer child. If only it were that simple. The truth is, this tree is dead when it's clearly alive nonsense isn't a one-off. It's part of a much bigger, much pettier pattern. HOAs have a long history of turning minor inconveniences into full-blown crusades, all under the banner of protecting property values. Spoiler alert, the only thing they're protecting is their own obsession with control. Let's roll the highlight reel. First up, solar panels. You'd think clean energy would be a slam dunk. Sunshine powering your home, lowering your bills, reducing emissions. What's not to love? Well, HOAs, apparently. In some neighborhoods, boards have fought tooth and nail to ban solar panels because they think they look ugly. Ugly? We're talking about sleek, modern panels that wouldn't be out of place on a sci-fi spaceship. But sure, let's call them ugly while giving a free pass to a neighbor's 1998 minivan parked on the lawn. Then there's the war on xeriscaping. That's eco-friendly landscaping designed to save water. Homeowners in drought-prone areas have swapped thirsty green lawns for gravel, succulents, and native plants, saving thousands of gallons of water a year. Logical, right? Environmentally responsible, right? Nope. Some HOAs still demand bright, perfectly mown lawns that guzzle more water than an Olympic swimming pool. In their eyes, a patch of decorative cacti is apparently a crime against suburbia. And don't even get me started on holiday decorations. Entire HOA chapters could be written about neighbors fined for hanging Christmas lights too early, too late, too bright, or my personal favorite, too many. Nothing says community spirit than threatening to fine your neighbor $100 a day because they dared to spread too much joy. Oh, and if you thought this nonsense stops with plants or lights, think again. There are stories of HOAs ticketing kids' basketball hoops left in driveways, regulating what color curtains you can have inside your home, yes, inside, and even fining people for having bird feeders. Bird feeders! Imagine being the guy who wakes up and thinks, you know what's really tanking our property values? Those sparrows. The common thread here is pettiness disguised as authority. HOAs love to wrap their rulings in official-sounding language, as if a bunch of neighbors on a power trip are suddenly Supreme Court justices. They'll use words like unsightly, non-compliant, and violates community aesthetic. Translation? We don't like it, so you can't have it. And now let's tie this back to our tree saga. The reason the dead tree ruling feels so familiar is because it follows the same formula. Step 1, misidentify something harmless or beneficial as a problem. Step 2, demand its removal or correction. Step 3, threaten fines until the homeowner complies. It's the HOA playbook, and they've been running it for decades. And here's the really frustrating part. All of this comes at a cost. Homeowners end up spending money, sometimes thousands of dollars, fixing problems that aren't problems. Whether it's removing a healthy tree, installing a water-wasting lawn, or repainting a perfectly fine front door, these arbitrary rules create financial stress for residents, all while padding the HOA's sense of control. To put it bluntly, HOAs act less like guardians of property values and more like suburban hall monitors. Remember that kid in middle school who loved telling the teacher when someone was chewing gum? That kid grew up and joined an HOA board. And now, instead of tattling about gum, they're sending certified letters about your recycling bin being visible for 6 minutes longer than the bylaw allow. Of course, defenders of HOAs will say, we keep neighborhoods looking nice. But let's be real. There's a difference between maintaining basic standards and micromanaging people's lives. A tidy lawn? Great. Forcing someone to kill a healthy tree because you can't tell the difference between winter and death? That's not maintaining order. That's cosplaying as a dictator. And it's not just about aesthetics either. The pettiness has real environmental consequences. When HOAs ban solar panels, they discourage clean energy. When they outlaw xeriscaping, they encourage water waste. When they demand tree removals, they eliminate natural shade and habitats. It's not just a matter of taste. It's a matter of the environment, community health, and yes, even property values. So no, the dead tree incident isn't an isolated mistake. It's a symptom of a much bigger disease, an HOA culture that prioritizes arbitrary control over common sense. And the worst part? Homeowners are usually left holding the bill. And speaking of bills, let's talk about what these trees actually do for us. Because while the HOA sees an unsightly corpse, science sees an unsung hero. Buckle up, because the next fact isn't just about the absurdity, it's about the incredible value of the very trees HOAs love to hate.
All right, time to flip the script. We've roasted the HOA, laughed with Reddit, and scratched bark like amateur arborists. But now let's pause and ask, why does this even matter? Why fight so hard for one tree? Well, because trees aren't just background props in your neighborhood landscaping. No. They are the ultimate VIP neighbors, the Beyoncé of the block, the MVPs of suburbia. And cutting one down because some clipboard warrior thinks it looks dead is like firing your best employee because they wore sweatpants to Zoom. Let's start with the obvious, air quality. Trees are nature's air purifiers. Every single day, they filter out pollutants, absorb carbon dioxide, and pump out fresh oxygen like the leafy lungs of the planet. One mature tree can absorb up to 48 pounds of CO2 a year. That's not just science, that's free, around-the-clock environmental service. Your HOADs don't even buy you a pool key that works 100% of the time, but a tree? That's free clean air, delivered daily. Next, temperature control. Ever wonder why it feels like you're walking into a blast furnace when you cross a treeless parking lot in July? That's because asphalt absorbs and radiates heat like a frying pan. But a single well-placed tree can cool the area beneath it by up to 20 degrees. That means shade for your house, lower AC bills, and fewer sweaty afternoons where your car seats feel like lava. Your tree isn't just alive, it's saving you money every summer. Try telling that to the HOA. Then there's wildlife. Birds, squirrels, insects, even the occasional raccoon. They all rely on trees for food, shelter, and survival. Your dead tree that's sprouting buds, it's also a hotel, a restaurant, and a daycare center rolled into one. Chop it down unnecessarily, and you're evicting an entire ecosystem. Congratulations, HOA, you've just declared war on nature's tenants. Hope you're ready for the squirrel uprising. But wait, there's more. Mental health. Yep, science says that simply being around trees reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and improves mood. There's a reason people take walks in parks or go hiking in forest when they're stressed out. Trees are living antidepressants, except they don't come with side effects and your insurance doesn't fight you over the copay. In fact, neighborhoods with more trees consistently report higher levels of happiness and well-being. So when the HOA demands tree removal for no reason, they're not just messing with your yard, they're messing with your sanity. And let's not forget the golden ticket. Property value. Studies have shown that homes with mature trees can be worth anywhere from 3 to 15% more than similar homes without them. That means your leafy buddy isn't just shade and scenery, it's money in the bank. When buyers tour a neighborhood, they don't get excited about endless rows of beige houses with plastic shrubs. They light up when they see tall, healthy trees lighting the streets. It feels established. It feels alive. It feels like a place worth investing in. So here's the grand irony. By demanding the removal of a perfectly healthy tree, the HOA isn't protecting property values, they're sabotaging them. They're cutting down free air purifiers, free air conditioners, free mental health boosters, and free equity builders. It's like banning Wi-Fi in a neighborhood because someone on the board thinks the signals look tacky. Now, some HOA defenders might argue, but what if the tree was actually dead? Isn't that a safety hazard? Fair point. Dead trees can fall, damage property, and pose risks. But here's the thing. This tree wasn't dead. It was budding, alive, vibrant, ready to thrive. Demanding its removal anyway is like canceling a concert because the singer sneezed during rehearsal. Overkill, literally. The takeaway here is simple. Trees aren't optional accessories in your yard. They're essential. They're allies. And treating them like disposable decorations because the HOA can't tell the difference between the seasons is not just ignorant, it's destructive. Picture it this way. Your tree is like that neighbor who always helps you jumpstart your car, brings cookies during the holidays, and keeps an eye on your house when you're out of town. They're reliable, beneficial, and always around. Would you kick that neighbor out because they wore pajamas to get the mail? No? Then why evict a tree that's doing way more for your household than the HOA newsletter ever has? So yes, the tree is alive, but more than that, it's valuable. And cutting it down wouldn't just hurt one homeowner, it would chip away at the entire neighborhood's quality of life. If only HOAs understood that, maybe they'd stop sending these ridiculous letters. But then again, if HOAs had common sense, would we even be here talking about them? And here's where the plot thickens. Because while trees bring all these incredible benefits, guess what happens when the HOA actually gets its way and forces removals? Spoiler, they're not protecting value, they're killing it. Get ready for a deep dive into how HOAs, in trying to save property values, might actually be torching them instead.
All right, let's talk about the ultimate HOA plot twist. HOAs love to strut around claiming they're the guardians of property value. It's their favorite catchphrase. Ask an HOA board member why they banned your solar panels, outlawed your basketball hoop, or tried to assassinate your perfectly alive tree, and they'll puff out their chest and say, "We're protecting property values." But here's the kicker. In the case of our dead but not dead tree, they're doing the exact opposite. They're not protecting property value, they're chopping it down along with the tree. Let's get real for a second. Mature, healthy trees are literal moneymakers. Studies from real estate associations and environmental groups have shown over and over that homes with established trees can sell for thousands more than those without. Buyers see shady streets and leafy yards as signs of stability, comfort, and beauty. It's the suburban equivalent of curb appeal steroids. One study found in neighborhoods with tree-lined streets saw property values jump by as much as 15%. That's not pocket change. That's a serious boost. And it's not hard to understand why. When a prospective buyer drives up to your house, they don't just see four walls and a roof. They see the whole package. The landscaping, the shade, the vibe. A big, healthy tree out front says, "This house has been cared for. This neighborhood is thriving. Welcome home." Now let's compare that to what the HOA wants. No tree, just a barren patch of grass and maybe a stump like a sad gravestone marking where common sense died. Which house do you think the buyer is going to fall in love with? Spoiler, not the one where the HOA confused winter with a funeral. And here's where it gets even more absurd. Not only does removing healthy trees kill curb appeal, it can also drive up costs for homeowners. No shade means hotter houses in summer, which means higher energy bills. Instead of free, natural cooling from a leafy canopy, you're stuck running the AC like it's in a NASCAR race. That adds up fast. And buyers aren't stupid, they notice. A treeless yard isn't just uglier, it's pricier to maintain. But wait, there's more irony. Trees don't just make individual homes more valuable, they increase the value of entire neighborhoods. Studies have shown that communities with strong tree coverage attract higher income buyers, have lower crime rates, and are generally perceived as more desirable. By forcing unnecessary tree removals, HOAs aren't protecting the collective, they're undermining it. They're like a chef tossing out the main ingredient and then wondering why the dish tastes like cardboard. Let's put this in perspective with an analogy. Imagine a car dealership insisting that every vehicle on the lot must have its engine removed. Why? Because they think engines look messy. Sure, the cars will be shiny and uniform on the outside, but good luck driving them off the lot. That's what HOAs do when they demand the destruction of healthy trees. They're stripping away the very feature that makes the neighborhood valuable. And here's the double whammy. While homeowners are losing value, they're also losing money up front. Tree removal isn't cheap. Depending on size and location, you're looking at anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s. So not only is the HOA torching your future resale value, they're handing you a bill for the privilege. It's like paying someone to vandalize your car. The great irony is that HOAs often justify these moves with the idea of uniformity. They want neighborhoods to look neat, consistent, and high value. But uniformity without thought is just boring. A street full of cookie-cutter lawns with no trees is sterile, lifeless, and about as welcoming as a parking lot. Buyers don't want sterile. They want charm. They want shade. They want that "this feels like home" vibe. And let's not ignore the emotional factor. Trees aren't just property features, they're personal landmarks. Maybe your kids climbed that tree. Maybe you strung lights on it every December. Maybe you sat under it with your morning coffee while the world was quiet. Telling someone to chop it down isn't just a financial blow, it's an emotional gut punch. And nothing kills neighborhood harmony faster than an HOA ordering the execution of people's memories. So here's the verdict. When an HOA claims to be protecting property values by demanding the removal of a perfectly alive tree, they're lying to themselves and to you. The truth is, they're cutting down your curb appeal, raising your costs, lowering your resale value, and sucking the soul out of the neighborhood. All in the name of what exactly? A misguided sense of power? The only thing dead in this situation isn't the tree, it's the HOA's credibility as a protector of value. And honestly, that credibility isn't coming back in the spring. And if you thought this was a one-time mistake, think again, because the dead but not dead tree isn't the HOA's first plant-related crime scene. Nope, this is just one chapter in a long history of leafy injustices. Get ready, because the next fact exposes how HOAs have been waging war on perfectly healthy greenery for years.
By now, you might be thinking, Okay, so this HOA doesn't know the difference between a living tree and a dead one. That's ridiculous, but maybe it's just this one board. Maybe they're uniquely clueless. Oh, my friend, if only. Grab your gardening gloves and a stiff drink because this is far from the HOA's first leafy blunder. The war on perfectly healthy greenery has been raging for years, and it's uglier than a yard full of plastic flamingos. Let's start with the classics. Homeowners across the country have reported being forced to remove shrubs, flowers, and trees that were not only alive, but thriving. The reason? Non-compliance. That's the HOA's favorite word. It's vague, menacing, and almost always unnecessary. Translation, we don't like it, so it has to go. Take, for example, the HOA that demanded a homeowner rip out an entire rose garden because it wasn't in the approved plant list. Imagine tending roses for years, pruning, watering, and admiring their bloom, only to be told they're illegal. Illegal roses. What's next? Outlawing daisies for loitering? Charging tulips with tax evasion? Then there's the story of the HOA that forced a resident to cut down a decades-old oak tree because the board decided it looked messy. Messy? Folks, it's a tree, not your teenager's bedroom. Leaves fall, branches sway. That's called nature, not negligence. Removing an oak that's been standing longer than most board members have been alive is less about order and more about ego. And don't even get me started on vegetable gardens. In some HOA-controlled neighborhoods, growing your own food is practically treated like running a black market operation. Tomatoes in the front yard, fine notice. Zucchini patch near the driveway, expect a letter. Forget sustainability, forget saving money. Apparently nothing screams eyesore like fresh produce. But trees. Oh, trees are where the real drama unfolds. Healthy pines, maples, and oaks have all faced HOA execution orders for crimes as minor as casting too much shade or dropping too many leaves. Yes, you heard that right. Dropping leaves. As if deciduous trees didn't get the memo about HOA leaf quotas. It's the botanical version of fining a dog for barking or a baby for crying. And here's the kicker. It's not even rare. Scroll through forums or subreddits like r/fuckHOA, and you'll find a forest's worth of similar tales. One homeowner was told to chop down a tree because it leaned slightly toward the sidewalk. Another was fined because their tree roots lifted a corner of the pavement, a problem the city, not the homeowner, was technically responsible for. Yet somehow, the HOA swooped in like Batman with a vendetta against chlorophyll. What ties all these cases together is the same pettiness we saw in the dead tree saga. Instead of asking, is this tree adding value to the neighborhood, or is it actually dangerous? The HOA jumps straight to removal orders. It's lazy, it's costly, and it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how ecosystems and communities actually work. Think about it this way. Trees are some of the most low-maintenance neighbors you'll ever have. They don't blast music at midnight. They don't park in front of your driveway. They don't argue about politics at block parties. They stand there quietly, offering shade, beauty, and oxygen while minding their own business. And somehow, HOAs still find a reason to write them up. It makes you wonder, do some HOA boards have a personal vendetta against nature? Did a tree fall on a board member's car once and scar them for life? Or maybe they just get bored at meetings and think, whose yard can we micromanage today? Because at this point, the pattern is too consistent to ignore. And the damage goes beyond frustration. Every time a healthy tree is cut down because of HOA ignorance, it leaves a literal hole in the neighborhood. Less shade, less beauty, fewer habitats for wildlife. Multiply that across dozens of unnecessary removals, and suddenly your neat and uniform neighborhood looks more like a barren wasteland with a landscaping budget. The dead tree debacle is just the latest in a long line of leafy injustices. It's the poster child for a bigger issue. HOAs treating nature as if it were optional decor instead of an essential part of the community. And the worst part? Homeowners are the ones paying the price, financially, emotionally, and environmentally. So, no, this wasn't a one-off. It wasn't a simple mistake. It was part of a pattern, a trend, a full-blown HOA obsession with cutting down anything that doesn't fit their narrow idea of perfection. The only thing really dying here, common sense. But here's the twist. Not every homeowner bows to the HOA's leafy death sentences. Some push back. Some negotiate. And believe it or not, sometimes it actually works. Up next, we'll explore how negotiation with an HOA can turn the tables and why it's the closest thing to a peace treaty in the suburban Cold War.
Up to this point, we've been knee-deep in HOA chaos, wrongful tree death notices, absurd fines, and a board of nature experts who probably couldn't tell the difference between a pine cone and a pickle. But here's a plot twist worthy of a soap opera. Sometimes, just sometimes, it is possible to negotiate with an HOA. Yep, you heard me. These neighborhood overlords can be reasoned with, if you know how to play the game. Now, before you get too excited, let's set expectations. Negotiating with an HOA isn't like asking your buddy to split the bill. It's more like negotiating with a toddler hopped up on sugar. Possible, but prepare for resistance, theatrics, and maybe some screaming. Still, it can be done. Step 1. Know the rules better than they do. HOAs thrive on intimidation. They count on homeowners not actually reading the bylaws or CCRs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. But the truth is, most of these documents are vague, outdated, and filled with loopholes big enough to drive a landscaping truck through. When you can quote chapter and verse back to the board, suddenly you're not just a concerned resident. You're a force to be reckoned with. Imagine the look on their faces when you point out, actually, Section 12.4 only applies to hazardous vegetation, and my tree is alive. Next question. That's the kind of mic drop moment suburban legends are made of. Step 2. Bring receipts. And by receipts, I mean evidence. Photos, videos, even that fingernail test from fact number 3, document everything. HOAs love to operate in the land of vague accusations, but Heart Proof shuts them down faster than Wi-Fi at a board meeting. Show them your budding tree. Show them the scratch test. Heck, invite a certified arborist to give an official report. Nothing makes a board member squirm like science backed by signatures. Step 3. Rally allies. HOAs are less likely to dig in their heels if they know other homeowners are watching. Talk to your neighbors, share your story, and find out if they've been through similar nonsense. Often, you'll discover you're not the only one. And when multiple voices come together, suddenly the board realizes this isn't a one-on-one fight. It's a potential rebellion. And trust me, nothing terrifies an HOA more than the thought of angry residents showing up en masse at the next meeting, pitchforks in hand. Metaphorical, of course. Probably. Step 4. Stay professional, even if they don't. This one stings, I know. It's tempting to clap back with sarcasm, especially when you're dealing with people who thought your tree was auditioning for The Walking Dead. But the truth is, professionalism wins negotiations. Write clear, calm letters. Attend meetings prepared. If the board gets defensive or snippy, let them. You'll come out looking like the reasonable one, and reason goes a long way if things ever escalate legally. Now, does this always work? No. Some HOAs are as stubborn as concrete, but plenty of stories online show homeowners successfully overturning absurd rulings. Some have even managed to change the rules themselves by getting enough neighbors to vote on amendments. Think of it as a mini democracy. If the board is acting like tyrants, you can stage a quiet revolution with ballots instead of torches. And let's not forget the nuclear option, legal action. Nobody wants to drag things into court,
But sometimes the mere threat of a lawyer is enough to make an HOA backpedal faster than a kid caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Boards are often terrified of lawsuits because lawsuits mean expenses, bad press, and the possibility of losing their precious authority. If you've got evidence, allies, and the law on your side, suddenly that mandatory tree removal notice looks a lot more like a suggestion. The beauty of negotiation is that it flips the script. Instead of being the powerless homeowner cowering under the HOA's gavel, you become an active player. You're not just reacting, you're strategizing. And when you win, you're not just saving a tree, you're setting a precedent. You're showing the board, the neighbors, and maybe even yourself that HOAs aren't invincible. They can be challenged. They can be corrected. They can even occasionally be taught something about reality. And here's the best part. Sometimes negotiations lead to lasting change. A single homeowner standing up to an unfair rule can spark a larger conversation that reshapes the whole neighborhood. That's how communities move from petty power plays to actual common sense. That's how future trees survive, future gardens thrive, and future homeowners don't have to waste hours scratching bark to prove life exists. So yes, negotiation with an HOA is possible. Difficult? Absolutely. Frustrating? Always, but possible. And when it works, it's glorious, because nothing feels quite as satisfying than standing under the shade of your very much alive tree, sipping lemonade and thinking, I fought the HOA and I won. But here's where things really heat up, because while some homeowners negotiate, others take a different route. They expose. And thanks to the internet, every ridiculous HOA letter, every dumb rule, every dead tree fiasco can now go viral. Which brings us to our next fact. The rise of HOA shame culture.
If HOAs thought their reign of petty tyranny would go unchallenged forever, they clearly underestimated one very powerful force, the internet. Because in the age of smartphones and Wi-Fi, no ridiculous notice, no absurd fine, no "your perfectly alive tree is dead" letter is safe from going viral. Welcome to the era of HOA shame culture, where suburban nonsense meets global ridicule. Let's be real. 20 years ago, if your HOA sent you a bogus letter about your unsightly rose bush or demanded the removal of your budding maple tree, you had two options. You could grumble to your spouse over dinner, or you could complain to a couple of neighbors over the fence. And that was it. The HOA still had the upper hand because your frustration lived and died on your cul-de-sac. Fast forward to today. One blurry photo uploaded to Reddit, one ranty Facebook post, one TikTok with dramatic background music, and boom, your HOA's nonsense is no longer just a neighborhood issue. It's entertainment. It's content. It's the kind of thing people binge on their lunch breaks while muttering, "Thank God I don't live there." The dead tree story is the perfect example. A homeowner posted photos of a clearly budding tree and asked the internet, "Is this tree alive?" HOA says it's dead. The absurdity was too good to ignore, and Reddit ran with it. Memes were made, jokes were cracked, solidarity was formed, and suddenly a boring little HOA dispute turned into a viral lesson in common sense. This is what makes HOA shame culture so powerful. It doesn't just call out pettiness, it amplifies it. The internet loves stories of overreach because they strike a universal chord. Everyone, everywhere, has dealt with someone in power who had no clue what they were talking about. HOAs just happen to provide that drama on a silver platter with complete official-looking letters and the kind of rules that make you question humanity. And let's not forget the comment sections. Oh, the comments. They're like digital group therapy mixed with a roast battle. Strangers from across the globe pile in to share their own HOA horror stories, to mock the absurdity, and to validate the homeowner's rage. It transforms what could have been an isolating, frustrating experience into a communal event. Instead of feeling powerless, the homeowner gets cheered on like a gladiator in the Coliseum. Platforms like Reddit, TikTok, and even YouTube are becoming the ultimate HOA accountability tools. Got a notice saying your grass is too green? Post it online. HOA banning kids' sidewalk drawings? Film the chalk, film the letter, post it, wait for the internet to explode. And explode it will, because nothing fuels clicks like righteous indignation combined with comedy. And here's the delicious irony. HOAs often claim they enforce rules to maintain the community's reputation. But thanks to HOA shame culture, their actions now have the opposite effect. That reputation isn't sparkling curb appeal. It's being the punchline of a viral thread with 50,000 upvotes. It's strangers mocking you in memes. It's TikTok creators acting out your board meeting with bad wigs and exaggerated voices. In trying to control image, HOAs end up destroying it on a global scale. And even mainstream media has caught on. Outlets now scoop up viral HOA stories like the dead tree fiasco and turn them into articles with headlines designed to make readers spit out their coffee. Suddenly, what started as one silly notice has become a full-blown news story, archived forever for future generations to laugh at. Imagine explaining to your grandkids, "Yeah, our HOA wants viral for not knowing trees grow leaves in spring." Good luck living that down. But here's the kicker. Viral exposure isn't just funny, it's effective. Public shaming can actually pressure HOAs into backing down. Nobody wants their board's name trending on Reddit for being the neighborhood clowns. Some HOAs have quietly reversed decisions after their letters hit the internet, desperate to avoid further embarrassment. That's the real power of HOA shame culture. It doesn't just entertain, it holds petty authorities accountable. Of course, not every board learns the lesson. Some double down, convinced that the internet is wrong and their bylaws are sacred scripture. But once a story goes viral, that genie isn't going back in the bottle. Their reputation is toast, and every future ruling will be scrutinized by homeowners ready to hit post the second nonsense happens again. So yeah, the dead tree saga wasn't just one homeowner's headache. It was content. It was catharsis. It was another glorious addition to the growing library of HOA fails that live online forever. And as long as HOAs keep confusing budding trees with corpses, banning solar panels, or fining people for chalk drawings, the internet will be there, popcorn in hand, ready to roast. And that brings us to the final twist in this saga, because if the tree isn't really dead, what is? The answer might surprise you. Spoiler, it's not leafy, it doesn't sprout buds, and it sure as heck doesn't grow. Up next, the only thing truly dead in this story, the HOA's credibility. We've reached the end of this leafy roller coaster, and after everything, the notices, the buds, the Reddit roastings, one truth shines brighter than a freshly polished HOA nameplate. The tree isn't the dead thing here. Nope, the only thing truly 6 feet under is the HOA's credibility. Let's be honest, when a group of grown adults in charge of protecting property values can't tell the difference between a dormant tree and an actual corpse, their authority takes a nosedive. This wasn't a minor oversight, it wasn't an innocent mistake, this was a fundamental failure in common sense. It's like a doctor misdiagnosing a yawn as a coma, or a mechanic declaring your car totaled because the windshield wipers were off. Once you see incompetence at that level, it's hard to take the authority seriously ever again. Think about the ripple effect. If the HOA can't identify a living tree, what else are they messing up? Are they sending notices about imaginary violations? Are they fining people for phantom weeds? Are they running board meetings where the biggest agenda item is debating whether clouds are too unsightly on sunny days? The trust is gone. Poof. And trust, once lost, is the one thing no HOA bylaw can restore. And here's the delicious irony. HOAs often pride themselves on being the adults in the room. They're the enforcers, the protectors, the ones making sure the neighborhood stays in line. But in this case, it was the internet, the very crowd they dismiss as outsiders, that had to step in and explain winter. Imagine being so clueless that strangers online have to give you a crash course in seasons. That's not authority, that's comedy. It also raises a bigger question. Why do HOAs cling so tightly to control when they clearly lack the knowledge to wield it responsibly? If you're going to tell people what trees to plant, what lawns to grow, and what holiday lights to hang, shouldn't you at least pass a basic science quiz first? Maybe a multiple choice test with questions like, when do deciduous trees lose their leaves? A. Summer. B. Winter. C. Whenever the HOA says so. But of course, that'll never happen because HOA power isn't about knowledge, it's about control. And control, once exposed as baselifts, crumbles. That's why this tree saga went viral. It wasn't just funny, it was symbolic. It showed the whole world that the HOA emperor has no clothes. Or, in this case, no leaves. And let's not forget the financial angle. HOAs justify their rules with the mantra of protecting property values. Yet here they were demanding the removal of something that literally raises property values. Once again, their actions weren't just wrong, they were hypocritical. They claimed to be protecting the community while actively undermining it. That kind of cognitive dissonance doesn't scream trustworthy, it screams liability. The truth is, the only thing the HOA buried in this story was their own reputation. Neighbors now see them not as protectors, but as bungling micromanagers. The internet sees them as a punchline. And the homeowner? They walk away as the hero, the reasonable, level-headed person who stood their ground while the board tried to gaslight them into cutting down a tree that was literally sprouting buds. This is why stories like these matter, because they strip away the illusion of HOA power and reveal what's really going on. A handful of people making arbitrary calls without accountability. And thanks to platforms like Reddit, those arbitrary calls are no longer confined to boardrooms and mailboxes. They're broadcast, dissected, and laughed at by millions. Once that spotlight hits, the HOA can't hide behind its bylaws anymore. Its credibility is gone, shredded like fall leaves under a lawnmower. So no, the tree wasn't dead. It was alive, thriving, and ready for spring. What died here was something else entirely: the HOA's authority, its image, and its ability to be taken seriously. Because after you've mistaken a budding tree for a corpse, every future letter, every future ruling, every future notice comes with an invisible asterisk. These are the same folks who thought winter killed trees. And that's a label you don't shake easily. It sticks. It lingers. It becomes the HOA's legacy. Forget polished newsletters and fancy mission statements. When people Google your neighborhood, the first thing they'll see is the viral saga of the board that couldn't tell alive from dead. That's the kind of reputational damage that no landscaping company can fix. So here's the final verdict. The tree lives, the homeowner wins, the internet gets a laugh, and the HOA? Well, they're the only thing lying flat on the ground right now, right next to their credibility. And there you have it, 10 facts from the infamous Zombie Tree Showdown that prove once again why HOAs are less about harmony and more about hilarity. If this story made you laugh, rage, or want to go hug the nearest oak, smash that like button. And don't just stop there. Subscribe to HOA Wars for more tales of suburban nonsense, petty rules, and the everyday battles that prove the pen, and sometimes the fingernail, is mightier than the HOA. Because let's be real, the next ridiculous story, it's already sprouting, just like that tree.